Once upon a time, in the kingdom of Umari, a man's worth was weighed not by the goodness in his chest, but by the blood in his veins. A stranger could collapse at the palace gate, and the new guards would step over him like he was a fallen branch. That was the law nobody had written down. Everybody obeyed it anyway. And on the night before the coronation, the true heir to the throne of Umari lay shivering in the dirt outside his own gate. And not one person there knew his face. Prince Ekenedilichukwu had left this kingdom at 14 and stayed away 12 years. No portrait of the grown man hung anywhere. The only picture in the palace was of a thin boy with a gap in his teeth. A boy who had become a stranger. So when he came home 3 days early, climbed off a rickety bus at Nkwo Market, instead of riding through the front gate, he was just another tired traveler with ash on his arms and a dead phone in his pocket. He wanted to see his people with the eyes of a common man before they ever saw the crown. Then the fever came. Malaria he had carried home in his blood, and it dropped him right there in the dust. If stories of disguise, fevered nights, and the kindness nobody sees move you, then don't leave this one in silence. Tell me in the comments which city you are watching from, and the time on your clock right now. Tap subscribe before you forget. The gate is cold, and a poor maid named Chazo is walking toward it. Let me take you back to how it all began. The bus that brought him home was not built for a prince. It was a yellow danfo with one door that did not close, packed with traders, goats, and a woman selling boiled groundnuts from a tray on her lap. Ekenedilichukwu sat in the back, his knees against the seat in front, and watched Umari come into view through a cracked window. 12 years. The road was the same red road. The mango trees were taller. The palace rose on the hill above Nkwo Market the way it always had, white walls catching the late sun, and something in his chest pulled tight at the sight of it. He did not feel like a prince. He felt like a man returning to a house where the locks had been changed. His father, Igwe Nanabuif, was dying. That was the message that had reached him across the sea, 3 lines on a phone screen in a cold country. And it had sent him home before he was ready. The coronation was set for 3 days from now. The whole kingdom expected him. The Council of Elders expected him. And somewhere in that white palace on the hill, Chief Duruaku, the Onwu, the Prime Minister of Umari, was expecting him too, but not the way the others were. Ike knew the politics. He was not a fool. A boy sent away at 14 and called home at 26 does not return to open arms. He returns to a board already set, with men who have spent 12 years moving the pieces. So he made a decision somewhere over the ocean, a decision that would nearly kill him. He would not arrive as a prince. He would arrive as a nobody, walk through his own kingdom as a common man, and see with his own eyes who his people really were before he ever put on the crown. He climbed off the danfo at Nkwo Market with a small bag and no announcement. The market swallowed him. Women shouting prices over baskets of tomatoes. A wheelbarrow boy pushing yams through the crowd, calling out for people to clear the way. The smell of smoked fish and palm oil and dust. Ike walked through it slowly, and nobody looked at him twice. A man in a dusty shirt with a cheap bag was nothing here. He was invisible. And the strange thing, the thing he had not expected, was how good it felt. For the first time in 12 years, nobody was watching the crown. They were just letting him be. He bought roasted corn from an old woman and paid her the small money she asked. She called him my son, and gave him an extra piece without charging, and he stood there eating it, and feeling something he could not name. But the fever had already started its work in him. He had felt it on the bus, a heaviness in the bones, a heat behind the eyes. He told himself it was the long journey. 2 flights, a layover, the bad sleep, the danfo. Any man would be tired. He did not know that the mosquito that bit him in the cold country's airport lounge, where a traveler from somewhere had carried the parasite, had put malaria into his blood. He did not know the fever climbing in him now was the kind that kills men who ignore it. By the time he reached the foot of the palace hill, the sun was going down, and his legs were not answering him properly. He had planned to find a small place to sleep in the village, to spend a day or two watching before he revealed himself. That was the plan. But the heat in his body was rising fast now, and his thoughts were going soft at the edges, and the only thing his feet seemed to know was the way up the hill to the gate. Home. Some old animal part of him just wanted to go home. The palace of Umari sat behind high white walls. The main gate was tall and carved, but Ike, in his fevered confusion, drifted toward the smaller side gate, the one the staff used. He did not fully know why. He reached the wall and put his hand against it to steady himself, and the white stone was cool against his burning palm. And that small relief was almost enough to make him weep. 2 guards stood at the side gate. Young men. Sharp uniforms, new boots. The kind of men who had been hired recently and wanted everyone to know they mattered. Ike did not recognize them. Of course he did not. He had been gone 12 years, but they did not recognize him either, and that was the part that would matter. "Move," one of them said. "No loitering by the palace wall." Ike tried to speak. He tried to say his own name, the name that would have made these men fall to their knees. But the fever had thickened his tongue, and what came out was a low, slurred sound, the sound of a sick man, and to the guards it was the sound of a drunk or a beggar. "Are you deaf?" the second guard said. He came forward and shoved Ike in the chest, and Ike, who had once been strong, who had played football in the cold country and lifted weights and run for miles, went down like a sack of grain. He hit the dust and could not get up. "Aha," the first guard laughed. "See this one. He has come to die at the palace gate the night before the coronation. God forbid bad thing. Carry your nonsense somewhere else." "Leave him," the second one said. "He cannot even stand. By morning he will crawl away on his own, or the dogs will move him." And they turned their backs on the future Igwe of Umari and went back to their post, talking about the coronation feast and the meat that would be served. And Ike lay in the dust outside his own home with the fever roaring in his ears, and the white walls he had been born behind, rising up cool and indifferent above him. This was the kingdom he had come home to rule. A kingdom where a sick man could fall at the gate, and the men paid to guard it would step over him to talk about meat. He did not know it yet, lying there with his cheek against the red earth and the first stars coming out. But this was the night that would teach him everything. This was the night the kingdom would show him its true face. And this was the night a poor girl, with nothing to her name, would do the one thing that no one with power had done. She would stop. She would kneel, and she would see him. Kiyazakam was carrying the kitchen scraps to the back of the palace when she saw him. She was 23 years old, and she had been working in the palace of Umari for 2 years, sweeping the courtyards, washing the great pots, carrying water before the sun came up. She was an orphan. Her mother had died when she was 19, coughing blood in a one-room house in Nankuo, and her father had died long before that. So it was just Chazo and her younger brother Somtochukwu, a boy of 17 with asthma, that squeezed his chest every Harmattan season. She fed him on what the palace paid her, which was little. She had once wanted to be a nurse. She had finished 1 year of nursing school before the money ran out, and her mother got sick, and the dream had been folded up and put away like a good dress you cannot wear anymore. She knew suffering when she saw it, and the man in the dust by the side gate was suffering. At first she thought he was a drunk, the way the guards had thought. She almost walked past. It was late, she was tired, her arms ached, and a sensible girl in Umari did not go poking at strange men in the dark. But something stopped her, the way he was lying. not the loose, careless sprawl of a drunk man, but the rigid, shaking stillness of a body fighting something. His hand was clenched. His whole frame was trembling in a way that had nothing to do with the cool night. She set down the bowl of scraps and went closer. "Ogre," she said softly. "Ogre, hope no problem." He did not answer. His eyes were half open and they did not find her face. His lips were moving, but no clear words came. And when she crouched down and put the back of her hand against his forehead, the way her mother used to do to her, she nearly pulled it back. He was burning. Not warm. Burning, the kind of heat that frightens you. The heat of a fever that has climbed too high. "Cheque," she whispered. "This man is sick. This man is very sick." Everything she had learned in that 1 year of nursing school came back to her in a rush. The rigors, the shaking, the high fever that comes in waves. She had seen it before. In the rainy season, half the village burned with it at one time or another. Malaria. And not the mild kind you sweat out in 2 days. The way he was shaking, the way his eyes would not focus, the heat coming off his skin, this was the dangerous kind. The kind that could turn into something worse if it was not treated. The kind that put parasites into the brain and killed strong men in their beds. She looked up at the side gate. The 2 guards were there, lit by the lamp, laughing about something. She opened her mouth to call them, and then she closed it. She knew these guards. Everyone on the staff knew them. They were Chief Duraku's men, hired in the last few months, and they did not lift a finger for anyone below them. If she called them and said a sick beggar was dying at the gate, they would tell her to mind her work. They might even beat the man for the crime of being sick where rich people walked. She had seen it happen. A market woman had once fainted near the front gate, and they had dragged her off the road by her wrapper, like she was rubbish. No, the guards would not help. The guards were the reason this man was lying here in the first place. So Chiasso made a decision, and it was a decision that could cost her everything she had. Her job. Her brother's medicine, the little room they shared. Because a servant girl who brings a strange sick man into the palace grounds without permission is a servant girl who can be thrown out into the road by morning. And Chiasso knew this, knew it completely, and she did it anyway. She got her shoulder under his arm. "Ogre, you have to help me small," she said, breathing hard. "I cannot carry you alone. Stand small, just small." Some part of him heard her. His legs found a little strength, enough, and together they staggered up, the burning man and the small girl, and she half dragged him along the wall, away from the lamplight, toward the low building at the back where the staff slept, and the old storeroom stood mostly empty. It was the longest 40 meters of her life. He was heavy. He was hot against her side like a coal. Twice he nearly fell, and twice she held him up by sheer stubbornness, her feet sliding in the dust, her whole body shaking with the effort. If anyone saw her now, she had no story that would save her. But nobody saw. The staff were at evening prayers. The guards were laughing at the gate, and the night covered them. She got him into the old storeroom and laid him down on a mat among the sacks of rice and the broken furniture. And then she stood there in the dark, her heart pounding, and understood what she had just done. She had stolen a sick stranger into the Igwi's palace. There was no undoing it now. "Okay," she said to herself, "the way you talk to yourself when you are afraid. Okay, first the fever. Bring the fever down. That is first." She knew this part. She knew it cold. You do not dump a fevered body in ice water, no matter how much the family in the village wants to, because the shock can do more harm than good, and the shivering only drives the fever higher. You cool slowly. Lukewarm water, a cloth, the neck, the armpits, the groin, where the big vessels run close to the skin. You bring it down gently, like talking a frightened animal down from a wall. She ran for water and a cloth, moving like a thief in her own home, and she came back, and she began. All through that night, Kyazo knelt beside a man whose name she did not know, and fought his fever with a rag and a bowl of water. She wiped his brow and his neck and his arms. When the water grew warm from his heat, she went and changed it. She lifted his head and dripped water between his cracked lips. A little at a time, never too much, because she remembered that a fevered body loses water fast and dries out from the inside, and that the drying out is its own danger, and that the cure is not a flood but a patient, steady trickle, again and again, through the long hours. She worked by feel and by memory. She remembered her teacher, Sister Adeze, a stern woman with kind hands, walking the rows of beds in the training ward and drilling them. The fever is not the enemy, the teacher used to say. The fever is the body fighting. Your job is not to crush the fighter. Your job is to keep the body from burning down its own house while it fights. So you cool the skin where the blood runs close. You keep the water going in. You watch the breathing. And above all, you do not panic, because a frightened nurse is no nurse at all. So Kyazo did not panic, though her hands wanted to shake. She watched his chest rise and fall, and counted the breaths under her own. She watched for the bad signs Sister Adeze had warned them about, the signs that the fever had gone past the body and reached the brain. A stiffness in the neck, a fit, or a convulsion, a sleep too deep to wake from. If she saw those, she knew there would be nothing she could do in a storeroom, and the man would need a hospital and a drip and things she did not have. She prayed she would not see them. She watched his neck. She kept the water going. He raved. He spoke in the broken language of fever. Once he said a word that sounded like a name, Nabuif, and once he wept like a child and called for his mother, and Kyazo, who had buried her own mother, held his shaking hand and said, I am here, you are not alone," even though she did not know who he was, or whether he would live to see the morning. The night was very long. Outside, far off, she could hear the palace dogs, and once the laughter of the guards drifting on the wind, those same men who had thrown this dying person down like rubbish. She thought about that as she wiped his arms. She thought about how a few meters of wall and a clean uniform was all that stood between the people who stepped over a dying man and the people who would have helped him, and how thin that wall really was, and how the men on the comfortable side of it had somehow convinced themselves they were the better kind of human being. She did not have words for it, not the fine words, but she felt the wrongness of it deep in her chest, the way you feel cold. Her own arms were burning now from the hours of work. There was a moment, somewhere in the deepest part of the night, when she thought, I could stop. I could leave him here and go to my bed, and in the morning say I knew nothing, and no one would ever blame me. The thought came, and she looked at it honestly, because she was tired and afraid and human, and then she looked at his face, slack and young in the lamplight somebody's son, and she dipped the cloth again. She did not stop. She had promised her mother, long ago, that she would not become the kind of person who could walk away. Tonight that promise had a stranger's life inside it. She did not sleep. The fever broke a little near dawn, his skin growing damp instead of dry, the shaking easing, and she sat back against a sack of rice and closed her burning eyes for just one moment. That was when the door opened. It was Mama Ninkechi. The old woman stood in the doorway with a lamp in her hand, and her eyes moved from the sleeping man on the mat to the bowl of water, to the exhausted girl slumped against the rice, and her face did a great many things at once. Mama Nkechi was the head housekeeper, 60 years old, and she had run the inside of the palace for longer than Kyazo had been alive. She was the only person in that whole place who had ever shown Kyazo a grain of kindness. When the other servants mocked Kyazo's worn slippers, Mama Nkechi told them to shut their mouths and do their work. When Somto Chukwu could not breathe one terrible night, it was Mama Nkechi who pressed a little extra money into Kyazo's hand and said nothing about it after. She was hard, and she was old, and she had seen everything. And Chiazo loved her the way you love what is left of your family when your family is gone. "Chiazo, come," she said very quietly. "What have you done?" Chiazo scrambled up. The words poured out of her in a frightened rush. The man at the gate, the fever, the guards who would not help, the fear that he would die in the dust. She showed Mama Nkechi the heat still coming off his skin, the cloth, the way she had cooled him through the night. Mama Nkechi knelt, slow on her old knees, and put her own hand to the man's forehead, and her face grew grave. She had nursed enough fevers to know a bad one. She looked at this stranger's face for a long moment, a man perhaps 26, gaunt and ashen, a beard of 2 days, dust in his hair. There was something about the bones of his face, something that tugged at the edge of an old memory and then was gone. She shook her head. "You foolish, foolish girl," she said. But there were tears standing in her old eyes. "Do you know what they will do to you if Chief Duruaku finds a stranger in this palace the night before the coronation? Do you know?" "I know, Ma," Chiazo whispered. "I know. But Ma, if I left him, he would have died. I could not. I could not leave a person to die because leaving him was safer for me. I just could not." And Mama Nkechi looked at this girl, this orphan with nothing, who had risked the only thing she had to save a man who could give her nothing back, and the old woman felt something move in her chest that she had not felt in a long time in that cold palace of scheming men. She felt the thing the kingdom had forgotten. She felt the worth of a person who had nothing but a good heart. "Then we will not leave him," she said at last, wiping her eyes roughly. "God help us both. But we must be quick, and we must be silent, and you must do exactly as I say." The two women worked together through the morning. Mama Nkechi knew which of the kitchen staff could be trusted and which could not. She knew how to move through the palace without being seen. But the fever, though it had broken once, came back stronger as the sun rose. The way malaria does, in waves, each peak a little higher. And by midday it was clear to both of them that cloths and water would not be enough. The man needed medicine. He needed the real thing, the proper treatment, the tablets that kill the parasite in the blood, or this fever would climb until it reached his brain. And here was the cruelty of it. There was no medicine in the palace storeroom for a man who did not officially exist. To get the proper anti-malarial drugs, someone would have to go down to Enquo, to the small chemist by the market, and buy them. And that took money. Real money, more than a servant earned in many days. Chiazo had money. She had exactly one place she kept money. It was tied in a corner of cloth and hidden under a loose floor stone in the room she shared with her brother, and it was the money for Somtochukwu's asthma medicine, his inhaler. The Harmattan was coming, the dry, dusty wind that closed his chest like a fist, and without that medicine, when the bad nights came, her brother would sit up gasping for air, with his shoulders hunched and his lips going grey, and there would be nothing she could do but hold him and pray. That was the money. That was the only money there was. The medicine for her brother, or the medicine for a stranger. She sat in the storeroom with that choice in front of her, and it tore her in two. If she spent it on the stranger and the Harmattan came early, her brother could suffer, could be in real danger. Her own blood, the only family she had left, the boy she had promised her dying mother she would protect. How could she gamble his breath on a man whose name she did not even know? What kind of sister does that? Any reasonable person in Umari would tell her, your first duty is to your own. Save your money. Let the stranger take his chances. You owe him nothing. She thought of Somtochukwu on the bad nights. The sound he made, that thin whistling pull, his shoulders climbing up toward his ears as he fought for each breath, his eyes wide and frightened in the dark and fixed on her face, because she was the one who was supposed to make it better. She thought of the grey colour his lips went. She thought of the inhaler in his hand, and how his whole small body would loosen when the medicine reached him. The relief of it, the way he would finally lie back. That was what the money bought. That feeling, that breath. And she was thinking of handing it to a man lying unconscious on a mat, who might die anyway no matter what she spent. It was not a small thing. She wanted to be honest with herself about how big it was. People who have never been poor talk about generosity as though it costs nothing, as though kindness is just a nice feeling you decide to have. But real generosity, the kind that counts, is the kind that takes food out of your own mouth, or in this case the breath out of your own brother's chest. And Chiazor knew exactly what she would be spending, down to the last coin, and exactly who would feel the lack of it. That was what made it a true choice, and not just a pretty gesture. But then she looked at the man on the mat, raving, helpless, dying, and she thought about a different thing her mother had taught her. Her mother, who had nothing, who shared their last yam with a hungrier neighbor more than once. Chiazor, her mother used to say, a person is a person. When God puts a dying man in your path, he is not asking whether you can afford to help. He is asking what kind of person you are. She untied the cloth. She counted the money with shaking hands, and she sent word to Mama Nkechi that she was going down to Nakhkwo, to the chemist, to buy what the stranger needed. She bought the anti-malarial tablets, the full course, the proper one the chemist recommended for a severe case, and she spent nearly everything she had. And she walked back up the hill with the small paper bag held against her chest like it was made of gold. She told herself the Harmattan might come late this year. She told herself she would find the money again, somehow work extra, borrow, beg. She told herself her brother would understand. And underneath all of it, she was simply terrified, because she had just spent her brother's breath on a stranger, and she did not know if she had done a beautiful thing or a foolish one. What she did not know, what she could not have known, was that the raving man on the mat had surfaced for just a few moments while she was gone. The fever had loosened its grip for the space of a breath, and in those few clear moments, Prince Ekenedilichukwu had heard, through the thin storeroom wall, two women talking. He had heard an old woman ask a girl how she could spend her own brother's medicine money on a man she did not know. And he had heard the girl answer. He had heard her say, "Because he is a person, Ma," and nobody else stopped. Then the fever took him back down into the dark, but those words went down with him, and they did not leave. The medicine worked, but slowly, the way real medicine does. Not the magic of films, but the slow turning of a sick body back toward life. Through that second night, and into the next day, Chiazor gave him the tablets on the schedule the chemist had written. And she kept the water coming, and little by little the fever loosened its hold. By the second morning, the man slept a true sleep instead of a raving one, and his skin was cool, and his breathing was even. And Chiazor, watching him, allowed herself for the first time to believe that he might live. But the coronation was now 1 day away, and the palace was filling up. Chief Duroaku, the Onowu, had been a busy man. With the old Igwe Nanabuife on his sickbed, and the heir vanished somewhere across the sea, Duroaku had spent 12 years making himself indispensable, and he did not intend to give that power up. His plan was simple and ugly. His daughter, Ogechukwu, would be installed as the wife of the new Igwe, and through her, Dutwaku would hold the throne in his fist. The only problem was the heir himself, this Ekenedilichukwu, who had not yet appeared, and whose absence Dutwaku found very convenient and was quietly hoping to extend. Ogechukwu was 27, beautiful in the cold way of a polished stone, and she had been raised to believe that the world divided cleanly into people who mattered, and people who existed only to serve them. She swept through the palace that day in expensive lace, inspecting the preparations, finding fault with everything, and the servants scattered before her like chickens before a hawk. It was Og who found the storeroom. She was looking for a place to store some crates of imported wine for the feast, and she pushed open the door of the old storeroom, and there, on a mat among the rice sacks, lay a sleeping man in dirty clothes, and kneeling beside him, a damp cloth in her hand, was a servant girl. For a moment nobody moved. Then Ogachukwu's face twisted, and she began to scream. "A man! There is a man in here! Guards! Guards!" She backed away as though the sight might dirty her. "You filthy, filthy girl, what is this? What is this abomination you have brought into the Igwe's palace?" Kiazo rose to her feet, her heart slamming. "Madame, please, he was sick. He was dying at the gate. I only—" "Quiet." Oja's voice cut like a blade. "Did I give you permission to open your mouth? Look at you. Look at the both of you. Two pieces of rubbish lying together in the dirt where you belong." Her eyes raked over Chiazo with a contempt so complete it was almost a physical thing. "You think, because you wear a clean uniform in this palace, you have become a human being? You are a floor scrubber. You will always be a floor scrubber. And now you have brought your fellow gutter dog into the home of the Igwe." The guards came running, the same two from the gate. Behind them, drawn by the screaming, came Chief Duruaku himself, his agbada flowing, his face dark with anger at the disturbance on this of all days. "What is the meaning of this?" he thundered. Ogj pointed a trembling, manicured finger. "This servant, this nothing, has hidden a strange man in the palace storeroom. The night before the coronation, a vagrant, a diseased beggar from the gutter, and she has been keeping him here in secret like a kept animal." Duruaku turned his eyes on Chiazo, and they were cold, and they were calculating, and Chiazo understood that this man did not care at all about the truth of what had happened. He cared only about how to use it. "So," he said softly. "A thief." "I am not a thief, sir," Chiazo said. Her voice shook, but she made herself speak. "I have stolen nothing. The man was dying at the gate and I—" "Be quiet." He did not raise his voice, and that was worse. He walked a slow circle around her, the way a leopard circles before it decides. "Let us see. A strange man appears in the palace, hidden by a servant. And what is missing, I wonder? Have you checked the silver, Ogechukwu, the wine? This beggar she brought in, was he her partner? Did she open the gate for a thief and now plays nurse to cover her crime?" It was a lie built in front of her eyes, beam by beam, and Chiazo could see exactly where it was going. They were not going to throw her out for kindness. They were going to brand her a thief. And the punishment for a thief who robs the Igwe is not the road. It is far worse. "Search the storeroom," Duruaku told the guards, "and search this girl's quarters. If so much as a spoon is missing from this palace, she will answer for it before the whole kingdom tomorrow." They searched. Of course they found nothing, because there was nothing to find, but Chiazo knew that men like Duruaku did not need to find anything. They could place a thing and then find it. She saw one of the guards, at a small nod from Duruaku, slip something from his own pocket toward the rice sacks, and her blood turned to water. "Wait," she said. "Please. I will tell you everything exactly as it happened, and I swear it on my mother's grave. But this man stole nothing, and neither did I. He fell sick at your gate. Your own guards refused to help him. I could not let a human being die in the dust, so I brought him in, and I nursed him. And I bought his medicine with my own money meant for my brother. That is the whole crime. That is all of it. Punish me if you must, but do not call me a thief, because before God I am not one." Duruaku looked at her, and for just a flicker something passed behind his eyes, because even a man like that can recognize the sound of pure truth when he hears it. But recognizing truth and caring about it are two different things. "A pretty speech," he said. "But you have humiliated this palace and yourself. You brought filth into the Igwe's home. Tomorrow, before the coronation, you will be brought before the elders and the people, and you will be made an example of, so that every servant in Umari learns what happens to those who forget their place. As for this beggar, he gestured at the sleeping man with disgust. Throw him back into the gutter where she found him. Let him die there if he must. He is nothing. No. Chiazo stepped between the guards and the mat without even thinking. Her arms spread. He is too weak. If you throw him out now, he will die. Please, please, I am begging you. Do what you want with me, but let him recover. He is a person. Whatever he is, whatever he has, he is still a person. And here is the thing that mattered. The thing that was being decided in that dim storeroom without anyone in power understanding it. The sleeping man was not asleep anymore. Princ Ekenedilichukwu had come back to himself. The fever was gone. His mind was clear for the first time in 3 days, clear and quiet and very, very awake. He lay still on the mat with his eyes barely open, and he listened, and he watched, and he understood everything. He saw the Onowu of his kingdom building a false charge against an innocent girl to make an example of her. He saw the woman they wanted to make his wife, screaming that a sick man and his rescuer were rubbish that belonged in the gutter. He saw his own guards preparing to plant stolen goods. And he saw a poor orphan servant who had spent her dying brother's medicine money on him, who did not know his name, who had nothing to gain and everything to lose, standing with her thin arms spread between him and harm, begging powerful men to spare a stranger's life. He had crossed an ocean to find out who his people really were. He had wanted to know if anyone in this kingdom would be kind to a man who could give them nothing back. And now, lying in the dust of his own palace, he had his answer. It had been given to him by the poorest person in the building. He closed his eyes again. Not from weakness now, from something else. He needed one more day. The coronation was tomorrow. And Prince Ekenedilichukwu, heir to the throne of Umari, began, very quietly, to plan exactly how he would walk into that ceremony. The day of the coronation came up hot and bright over Umari. But the night before it came was the longest night of Chiazo's life. Longer even than the night she had spent fighting the stranger's fever. They had locked her in a small room near the kitchen, and she sat on the bare floor in the dark and waited for a morning she was afraid of. She did not weep. She had gone past weeping into a kind of stillness. She thought about her brother, and what would happen to him with no sister and no money, and the thought was so heavy she had to push it away just to keep breathing. She thought about her mother. She wondered if she had done a foolish thing, after all, kneeling down beside that man. She decided, sitting there in the dark, that even if it cost her everything, she would not call it foolish. A person is a person. She had done what her mother raised her to do. If the world punished her for it, then the fault was in the world, not in the kneeling. She held on to that through the dark hours, the way a drowning person holds onto wood. Once, near the middle of the night, she heard a soft sound at the door, a scratching, and then Mama Nkechi's voice, very low, through the gap. "Chiazokam, are you there?" Just that. The old woman could not get her out, could not change anything, had only come in the dark at great risk to herself to let the girl know she was not entirely alone in the world. Chiazo pressed her hand against the door where the old voice was, and on the other side an old hand pressed back, and neither of them said anything more, because there was nothing to say, and everything had already been said by the simple fact of the old woman coming. Then Mama Nkechi crept away before the guards changed, and Chiazo was alone again, but a little less alone than before. When the first grey light came under the door, she stood up and smoothed her dirty uniform with her hands, as if neatness could armor her, and she waited for them to come for her. She did not know that the man she had saved was awake. She did not know that anything good was coming. She believed, fully, that she was walking out to be branded a thief before the whole kingdom. And she had decided to walk out with her head up anyway. That is its own kind of courage, the kind that does not expect to be rewarded. The kind that does the right thing into what looks like only darkness ahead. The grounds before the palace had been transformed. A great canopy of red and gold cloth had been raised, and beneath it sat the council of elders in their finest, the chiefs and the title holders, the wealthy of the kingdom in their lace and their coral beads. Drummers waited at the edges. Hundreds of common people from Nanquo and the villages around had gathered behind the ropes to witness the crowning of their new Igwe, because the old one, Nabuife, was too weak to rule, but had asked to be carried out on this day to see it done. And at the center of it all stood Chief Duruaku, master of ceremonies, the most powerful man present, with everything arranged exactly as he wished. Everything except one thing. The heir had still not appeared. Duruaku was not worried. He had a plan for that too. If Ekenedilichukwu did not come, the council could be persuaded that the boy had abandoned his duty, and that a regent must be appointed to hold the throne until the matter was resolved. And who better than the loyal Onowu, who had served so long? Either the boy appeared and married Ogj, or the boy did not appear, and Duruaku took the throne himself. Both roads led to the same place. He had spent 12 years making sure of it. But first, the example. "Bring out the girl," Duruaku announced to the crowd, his voice ringing under the canopy. "Before we crown our new Igwe, let justice be seen. Let every person in Umari witness what becomes of a servant who betrays the trust of the palace." They brought Chiazo out before the crowd. She had not slept. Her uniform was dirty, her face streaked, her wrists held by the 2 guards. Somewhere in the crowd, brought there by a neighbor who had heard the terrible news, stood her brother Somtochukwu, his face white with fear for his sister, his breath already short with the dust and the panic. Mama Nkechi stood at the edge of the servants, her old hands clenched, helpless, her eyes never leaving the girl. "This girl," Duruaku proclaimed, "did open the palace gate to a vagrant thief, and did hide him in the storeroom, and did conspire to rob the Igwe on the eve of his coronation. The penalty for such betrayal." "The penalty," said a voice, "is whatever I decide it is. Is that not so, Onowu?" The voice came from the back, from beyond the ropes, from the crowd of common people. It was not loud, but it carried, the way certain voices do, and a silence fell under the great canopy, and every head turned. A man was walking forward through the crowd. The people parted for him without knowing why. He still wore the same dusty clothes, the clothes of a beggar, the clothes he had collapsed in at the gate. He was thin from the fever, and there was a gauntness in his face. But he walked upright now, and his eyes were clear, and there was something in the way he moved, some old authority that did not come from clothes, that made even the guards take a step back. Chia's heart stopped. It was him, the stranger, the man she had nursed. He was alive, he was walking, and he was walking straight into the lion's mouth. "Who is this madman?" Duruaku demanded. "Guards! This is the very beggar! The thief himself has come to the coronation. Seize him." The guards moved toward him, and the man reached up, and from around his own neck he drew out something that had been hidden under his ragged shirt all this time, hanging against his chest through the fever and the dust and the long, terrible nights. He held it up so it caught the sunlight, and the whole canopy saw it, and a gasp went through the elders like a wind through dry grass. It was the royal signet of Umari, the seal of the heir, the mark of the bloodline that only one living person in the world had the right to wear. And from his place on the carried chair where he had been brought out to watch, the old Igwe Nanabuife, who had not spoken above a whisper in weeks, lifted his head and looked at the gaunt man in the beggar's clothes, and tears ran down the old king's face. And he said, in a cracked voice that somehow reached the whole silent ground. "My son, Ekenedilichukwu, you have come home." The silence broke into chaos. "Impossible," Duruaku said, but the color was draining from his face. "This is a trick. This vagrant cannot be. I left this kingdom at 14, Onowu." Ekenedilichukwu's voice was quiet, and it cut through the noise like a knife through cloth. "You remember. You stood beside my father, and you agreed it was best that the boy be sent far away. No portrait of the man I became was ever hung in these halls. I made certain of that these last days, because I wanted to come home as nothing. I wanted to walk through my own kingdom as a common man and see with my own eyes what kind of people my father's nobles truly are." He turned slowly, and his gaze swept across the elders, across Ogachukwu frozen in her fine lace, and came to rest on Duruaku. "And I have seen it. I have seen all of it." He began to walk toward the canopy, and the crowd held its breath. "3 nights ago," he said. And now he spoke not just to Duruaku, but to the elders, to the people, to everyone. "Your future Igwe collapsed at the side gate of this palace, burning with malaria, unable to speak his own name. And your guards." He nodded at the 2 men, who were now trying to make themselves small. "These men of yours," Onowu looked at a dying man, and then stepped over him to talk about the meat at the feast. "They shoved me into the dust and left me to die at my own gate." Murmurs ran through the crowd, dark and rising. And then Ekenedilichukwu continued, and his voice changed, softened. "A girl found me." He turned, and he looked at Kyazo, still held by the guards, staring at him with an expression that had gone past fear into pure disbelief. A servant girl, an orphan, the poorest person in this entire palace. She knelt down in the dark beside a stranger who could give her nothing, and she did not call him filth, and she did not step over him. She carried me on her own back to shelter. She fought my fever through the whole night with a rag and a bowl of water, never sleeping, while your nobles slept in their fine beds. And when I needed medicine, real medicine, this girl," his voice caught, and he mastered it. "This girl took the money she had saved for her own sick brother's breath, her only money in this world, and she spent it on a stranger. Because," she said, and I heard her say it through the wall, "he is a person," and nobody else stopped. He was standing before Duruaku now, and he was no longer the gaunt, fevered beggar. He was the Igwe-to-be, and his anger was a cold and terrible thing. "And this is the girl, Onowu, that you dragged before my people to brand as a thief. This is the girl your daughter called rubbish in the gutter. You were going to make an example of the one person in this kingdom who showed a dying man simple human kindness. You were going to punish the only good heart in this palace to cover for guards who left their prince to die." The silence was total. Even the drummers did not breathe. "Release her," said Ekenedilichukwu. "Now." The guards let go of Chiazo's wrists as if they had caught fire. Chiazo stood there, rubbing her freed wrists, swaying, not understanding, the world tilting around her. The man she had nursed, the dying stranger, the prince. She looked at him, and her legs would not hold her, and she sat down hard on the ground in front of the whole kingdom, and put her face in her hands and wept, because she had been so afraid for so many hours, and now the fear had nowhere to go. But Ekenedilichukwu was not finished. He turned back to Chief Duruaku, and the reckoning came. "Elders of Umari," he said, raising his voice now so it reached every ear under the canopy and beyond the ropes. "You have served my father long and faithfully, most of you, and I honor you. But hear what your Onowu has done, and judge for yourselves whether such a man should stand beside the throne of Umari." He laid it out plainly, beam by beam, the way Duruaku had built his lie, except this was the truth, and it did not need building. The guards Duruaku had hired, who answered to him and not to the palace. The plan to brand an innocent girl a thief. The object the guard had tried to plant in the storeroom. which Ekenedilichukwu had himself seen with his own clearing eyes. And, more than that, the longer game. The 12 years of a prime minister making himself a king in all but name. The convenient absence of the heir. The daughter positioned to be married into power. "You hoped I would not come home, Onowu," Ekenedilichukwu said quietly. "And if I did not, you had your regency ready. Either road led to your hand on this throne. Did it not?" Duruaku's mouth opened and closed. He had no speech now. The man who had always had words found that they had all deserted him at once. And, around him, the elders were murmuring, and the murmur was turning, and he could feel the ground shifting under his expensive sandals. The eldest of the council, a white-haired man named Pa Okwudili, who had served 3 Igwes and feared no one, rose slowly to his feet. "Ekenedilichukwu, son of Nanabuife," he said, "we have heard you, and we have eyes. We have wondered these long years how the Onowu grew so mighty while our Igwe grew so weak. Today we have our answer." He turned to Duruaku, and his old voice was iron. "Duruaku, by the authority of this council, you are stripped of the title of Onowu. You will hold no office in Umari again. What further answer you must give for planting false evidence and abusing the guards of this palace, the new Igwe and the council will decide. But your hand will never again be near this throne." There was no escape, and Duruaku knew it. The guards who had been his were now backing away from him, because guards always know which way the wind has turned. And the crowd that had feared him that morning was looking at him now with the hard, flat eyes of people who have learned the truth about a man they served. He was led away, no longer the most powerful man in the kingdom, just an old schemer whose schemes had finally been laid bare in the sun. And Ogachukwu. She stood in her beautiful lace, the dream of being the Igwe's wife dissolving around her like salt in water. She had called Chiazo rubbish in the gutter. She had screamed that a sick man and his rescuer were filth. And now the whole kingdom had seen the sick man rise up as their prince, and seen the rubbish honored as the only decent soul in the palace. And Ogechukwu felt every eye that had once envied her turn cold. No one would marry her now into anything. She had been raised to believe that some people exist only to be stepped on, and she would spend a long time learning, in the years that followed, what it feels like to be looked at, the way she had looked at others. That was her karma, and it was a fitting one, because it was made entirely of her own contempt handed back to her. When it was done, when the schemers had been led away and the council had settled, Ekenedilichukwu walked across the open ground to where Chiazo still sat in the dust, and the whole kingdom watched. And he did the thing that no one expected. He knelt down. The prince knelt in front of everyone, to the level of the servant girl, so that his eyes were even with hers. "What is your name?" he asked gently. "Your true name. I want to hear it from you." "Chiazokam," she whispered. "It means, God answers my prayers." Something moved across his face. "Then your mother named you well," he said. "Now hear me, because this is the part that matters most, and it is the part a lesser story would get wrong." Ekenedilichukwu did not pull her up and declare her his bride on the spot and end it like a fairy tale, as if a woman's whole worth is a prize a man bestows. He had more respect for her than that, and he had watched her closely enough to know she was more than a happy ending. He stood, and he helped her to her feet, and he spoke so the kingdom could hear. "This woman wanted to be a nurse," he said. "She finished 1 year of her training before life took the money away, as life so often does to the poor, not because they lack the mind or the heart, but only because they lack the means. I have seen her hands work. I have felt them pull me back from death. There is no nurse in this kingdom with a truer calling." He looked at her. "Chazokam, if you will accept it, the palace will pay for you to finish your training, every year of it. Not as a reward I am throwing to you, but because Umari needs nurses like you, And because a gift you have earned 100 times over is not charity. It is justice. Chiazo could not speak. She could only nod, the tears falling freely now, different tears than before. And your brother, Ekenedilichukwu said. Somtochukwu, the boy whose medicine you gave away to save my life. Where is he? The boy came forward through the crowd, shaking, and the prince put a hand on his thin shoulder. You will never again sit up in the night fighting for breath with nothing to help you, he said. The best doctors in Lagos will see you. Not because you are owed it as the brother of a hero, though you are, but because no child in my kingdom should choke in the dark for want of a medicine that money could buy. That is not the Umari I intend to rule. That ends today. He turned, then, to face his people, and his father, weeping and smiling on the carried chair, and the elders, and the hundreds of Cobman folk pressed against the ropes, who had come to see a crowning, and had instead seen something they would tell their grandchildren about. My father is too weak to wear the crown, Ekenedilichukwu said, and the council has called me home to wear it in his place. So let me tell you, in the first hour of my reign, the only law I truly care for. In Umari, from this day, a person's worth will not be weighed by the blood in their veins, nor by the money in their hand, nor by the fineness of their clothes. It will be weighed by one thing only, by how they treat the person who can do nothing for them in return. He let that settle over the silent ground. Because I lay dying at my own gate, and the powerful stepped over me, and the powerless knelt down and saved my life. And if that does not teach a king what truly makes a person great, then the crown on his head is only metal, and means nothing at all. And the drums broke loose, and the kingdom roared, and an orphan girl who had spent her last money on a stranger stood in the sun beside the prince she had saved, not as his prize, but as the person who had shown an entire kingdom what it had forgotten. That is where the story turns, and I will tell you the end of it quickly, because the loud part is over, and what remains is the quiet part, which is the part that lasts. Chiazokum finished her nursing training. It took 3 years. She was, as the prince had known she would be, very good at it. And she went on to run the first proper clinic in Kwo, the village where she had once buried her mother for lack of care. Her brother Somtochukwu grew strong, his chest opening up as the years passed, and he became a teacher. Mama Ninkechi, who had risked herself to help hide a dying stranger, was honored in the palace for the rest of her days, and never had to lift a heavy pot again. And the prince and the nurse. Yes, in time, and it did take time, because the best things are not rushed. Ekenedilichukwu asked Chiazakam to be his wife, and by then it was not a king lifting up a servant. It was a man asking a woman he had grown to love and deeply respect, an equal, a healer, a person whose worth the whole kingdom had seen with its own eyes. She said yes. But she said yes to the man, the one she had nursed in the dust before she ever knew he wore a crown. She had loved him, she told him once, before she knew he was anything at all. And he said that was exactly why he could trust it. Now let me say something to you before you go. I have turned this story over in my mind many times, and the thing that stays with me is not the crown, and not the reveal, and not even the schemer getting what he deserved, satisfying as that is. The thing that stays with me is a small detail that is easy to walk past. It is the moment a tired girl, at the end of a long day, with aching arms and every reason to keep walking, chose to stop. Nobody was watching her. There was no reward in sight. There was every chance it would cost her everything, and it nearly did. She did not know he was a prince. She thought he was a beggar, which means she was kind to him for no reason at all, except that he was a human being in trouble, and she was a human being who could help. That is the whole thing, really. We like to imagine that if we ever met a king in disguise, we would treat him well. But the test is never the king. The test is the beggar. The test is the person who can give you nothing. The one it would cost you something to help, the one no one would blame you for ignoring. How you treat that person, when there is no crown to be revealed and no reward to be won, is the truest measure of who you actually are. Most of us will never rescue a prince. But every single one of us, today, tomorrow, will pass someone in the dust. And the only question that matters, the question Chiazakam answered, without even stopping to think, is whether we will be the ones who step over, or the one who kneels down. I know which one I want to be. I am still learning to be it. Maybe that is enough for a start. That is the story of the prince who slept outside his own gate, and the poor girl who did not know who he was, and saved him anyway. Thank you for staying with me until the end. Ogre Madhu tipped the bottle slowly, on purpose, and let the whole thing pour out across the floor he had just told the new trainee to clean. The water spread between the desks. The young man went down on one knee with a rag, in front of everybody, and started wiping. Nobody laughed louder than Gozi. She filmed it on her phone, holding it sideways like it was something worth keeping. "On your knees suits you," Madhu said. Loud enough for the back of the office to hear. "When you were born, your people already knew this is where you would end. Wipe well. That is the only thing your hands are good for." The trainee did not answer. 3 weeks he had been there. 3 weeks of being sent for water, for files, for nothing. Of being spoken to like a stray dog that had wandered into a place too clean for it. He just kept wiping, slow and steady, his face giving away nothing at all. Only one person in that whole room had a knot in her stomach watching it. Adeyeze Nwankwo gripped the edge of her desk and did not sit back down. But here is the thing nobody filming, nobody laughing, nobody pouring water on the floor had any idea about. The man on his knees with a rag in his hand could buy that entire building twice before lunch. And the day he stood up, the people grinning over him would learn exactly what it costs to mistake a quiet man for a weak one. So grab your popcorn, sit back, and enjoy. To understand how a man like that ended up on his knees in front of people who were not fit to carry his shoes, we have to go back 3 weeks. To a different city. To a very big house in Owerri, where the morning was quiet, and the man sitting at the long dining table was not smiling. Chief Obiora Adigwe was 71 years old. He had built Adigwe Holdings from one rented warehouse with a leaking roof into a company with branches in 5 cities, and he had buried a wife and survived 2 business partners who tried to ruin him. People who met him expected a loud man. He was not loud. He was the kind of quiet that made loud men nervous. In front of him, on the polished table, sat a brown envelope. Inside that envelope were 11 letters, anonymous letters. They had come over 4 months from junior workers at the Enugu branch. Cleaners, drivers, trainees, filing clerks. People at the very bottom of the company he had spent his life building. The letters all said different things, but underneath, they said the same thing. At the Enugu branch, if you were small, you were nothing. Workers were being made to stay until 10 and 11 at night with no extra pay. People were being insulted in ways that had nothing to do with work. And the official complaint box, the one Chief Adigwe had personally ordered to be installed in every branch, the one that was supposed to come straight to head office, was being emptied by the very people the complaints were about. The letters were sneaked out by hand, because that was the only way they could reach him. Chief Adigwe read the last letter again. It was short. It was written by somebody who clearly had not gone far in school, and that broke his heart more than the long ones. "Sir," it said, "we are not asking for money. We are only asking to be treated like human beings. That is all. Please, sir." He set it down. He pressed his thumb and finger into the corners of his eyes for a moment. Then he picked up his phone and called the one person in the world he trusted with this, his son. Ikenna Adigwe was 34. He had spent 6 years studying and working abroad, came home, and instead of demanding a corner office and a title, he had quietly learned the company from the bottom up because his father insisted on it. He had loaded trucks. He had sat in the accounts department for a year. He knew the difference between how a company looked on paper and how it smelled on the ground. "Ikenna," Chief Adigwe said when the call connected. "I need you to do something for me, and you are not going to like it." "Tell me." "Sir, Enugu branch is rotten. Not the numbers. The numbers are fine. That is the problem. That is how it hid so long. It is rotten in the way people there treat one another. I cannot send an audit team. The moment a suit walks through that door, everybody will smile and behave like a church choir, and the rot will just hide and wait. I need eyes that nobody knows are eyes." There was a pause on the line. Ikenna already knew where this was going. "You want me to go in?" "I want you to go in as nothing," his father said. "A trainee, bottom of the ladder. A different name, a small face nobody at that branch has ever seen. 90 days. You watch, you write down what you see, you say nothing. Then you come home and you tell me whether I should clean that branch or burn it down and start again." Ikenna leaned back in his chair in his apartment in Enugu, the city where, by chance, he already lived. He looked out the window at the traffic far below. 90 days as a trainee," he said slowly. "Father, do you know what they pay a trainee?" "I know exactly what I pay a trainee," Chief Adigwe said. 47,300 naira a month, and I want you to live on it. Move out of that big apartment. Rent something a real trainee on that salary would rent. Eat what they eat. Take the bus they take. If you live like me while you watch them, you will see nothing, because the suffering will not touch you. It will just be a film you are watching. Live it, my son. Then you will understand." Ikenna was quiet for a long time. Outside, a Danfo bus screamed its horn at nobody. "All right," he said finally. "I will do it. But not because of the company. Because of that last letter you read me. Nobody should have to beg to be treated like a person." "That," said Chief Adigwe softly, "is exactly why I am sending you and not somebody else." So it was settled. A man worth more money than most of the people in that branch would see in 10 lifetimes packed 2 bags, left the apartment with the marble floor, and rented a single room in Ugwoba, on the rough side of Enugu, where the road turned to red mud when it rained, and the landlord wanted 3 months in advance in cash. The room had one window that did not close all the way, a bed, a plastic chair, a small table, a bucket. The walls had been painted a long time ago by somebody who ran out of paint halfway and never came back to finish. At night, the room held the heat of the day like a closed fist. The first night, Ikenna lay on that bed and listened to a couple arguing in the next room about who had finished the kerosene, and he thought, "This is what 47,300 naira buys." And he had a bank account, and a father, and a way out. The people whose letters brought him here had none of those things. He chose a name. Ike Nwosu. Simple. Forgettable. The kind of name you could shout across an office without anyone looking up twice. And on a Monday morning, at 7:40, in a shirt he had deliberately bought second-hand and ironed until the collar went soft, Ike Nwosu walked into the Enugu branch of Adigwe Holdings to begin a 90-day trainee contract under a manager who had no idea he was about to spend 3 weeks insulting the heir to the entire company. The branch took up 4 floors of a glass building near the center of the city. Ike was put on the 3rd floor, in the operations section, given an employee number, 30419, and a desk that had been pushed so far into the corner that the man sitting there had the photocopier humming at his back all day, and the door to the storeroom rattling beside his head. His supervisor was a senior officer named Ifeanyi Madu. Everybody called him Oga Madu, and they called him that with their shoulders slightly hunched, The way you say the name of something that might turn around. He had been at the branch for 9 years. He had a soft, heavy body and a hard, dry face, and he had learned a long time ago that the easiest way to feel big is to find people you are allowed to make small. Within the first hour, Madhu had looked Ike up and down, taken in the soft collar and the cheap shoes, and decided exactly what he was. You, he said, not bothering with the name on the file. Trainee, stand up when I am talking to you. Ike stood. You see this office? This is not your father's compound where you can sit anyhow. People here have worked years to sit where they are sitting. You? You are starting from below the floor, so when I send you, you move. When I talk, you answer, yes, sir. Are we understanding each other? Yes, sir, Ike said. Good. Go and bring me water from downstairs. Not the warm one, the cold one. And if it is warm, you are going back down. Ike went. As he walked to the stairs, he heard Madhu say to the woman at the next desk, loud enough to carry, "These trainees they send us now. No home training." You can see suffering on his face from mourning. And the woman in Ngozi laughed the way a person laughs when laughing is the safest thing to do. That was the first morning. By the end of the first week, Ike Nwosu had a notebook, a small one that fit in his back pocket. And in that notebook, in handwriting that nobody would ever connect to a man who signed million-naira documents, he had begun to write things down. Monday. Driver, Sunday. Told to stay till 9:40 p.m. to wash Madhu's personal car. Not company work, no extra pay. Tuesday. Madhu shouted at the cleaner, Mama Grace, in front of clients, because the floor she had mopped 1 hour before had one footprint on it. Called her a useless old woman. Wednesday. 2 trainees made to stay till 10 p.m. doing filing that was not urgent. When one said his mother was sick, Madhu said, "Then your mother should have sent you to school, instead of sending you here to disturb me." He wrote the times. He wrote them exactly the way his father had taught him. A thing badly remembered is a thing that can be argued away. 10:41, 9:15, 8:50. The little specific numbers were the difference between a story and a fact, and Ike Nwosu was building facts. And in the middle of all of it, like one clean thing in a dirty room, there was Adieze Nwankwo. Adieze worked in records, 2 desks down. She was maybe 28, with the kind of face that did not perform for anybody. The first time Ike noticed her was not because she did anything dramatic. It was because of how she said good morning to the cleaner. Most people in that office walked past Mama Grace as though she were part of the wall. Adaze stopped every single morning and said, "Good morning, Mama. How is the body today?" And she waited for the answer. She actually waited. And Mama Grace, who got shouted at by Madhu and ignored by everyone else, lit up like a small lamp every time, because in a building full of people who looked through her, one person looked at her. On Ike's 3rd day, he could not find the right form to log an incoming shipment, and he had asked 2 people who both pretended not to hear him, because helping the trainee earned you nothing. Adieze saw him standing there with the same paper for 10 minutes. She got up, came over, and showed him without making him feel stupid about it. "Don't mind them," she said quietly, sliding the right file across. "Everybody here forgets they were once new. You will learn it in 2 days. Then you will be helping the next person. That is how it should work." "Thank you," Ike said. And then, because he was a man trained to watch people, he watched her go back to her desk, and he thought, "She has nothing to gain from helping me, and she helped me anyway. Write that one down too." He did not write it down. Some things you keep in a different place. There was one more thing he learned that first week, and it was the thing that turned the whole job in his chest from an assignment into something personal. He learned it from Mama Grace, of all people, in the small kitchen on the 3rd floor, where she was washing cups and he was waiting for Madhu's cold water. "You are a good boy," Mama Grace said to him, out of nowhere. "I can see it. You don't have that thing in your eyes the others have. She dried a cup. Be careful of that, Madhu. Especially be careful for the sake of that girl. A daisy. What about a daisy? Ike asked. He kept his voice flat, but his attention sharpened like a knife. Mama Grace looked at the door, then lowered her voice. Some months back, that man troubled her. You understand me? Troubled her. He would call her into his office for nothing. He put his hand on her one time, when nobody was looking. She is a strong girl. She pushed him, and she reported it. She wrote a complaint, dropped it in the box on the wall, the one that is supposed to go to the big men in Owerri. Mama Grace made a small, bitter sound. Nothing happened. Nothing. The complaint disappeared like water on a hot stone. And since that day, Madhu has been waiting, slowly, to make her regret that she ever opened her mouth. Ike stood very still. The cup of cold water in his hand was sweating onto his fingers. The complaint box, the one his father had personally ordered installed, the one being emptied by the very people the complaints were about. He had come to Enugu chasing 11 anonymous letters, and here, 2 desks from where he sat every day, was the woman whose strangled voice was somewhere underneath all of them. Who empties that box, Mama? He asked. Mama Grace looked at him as though the answer was so obvious, it was almost funny. Who else? She said. Madhu has the key. That night, in his hot little room in Ugwoba, Ike Nwosu did not sleep. He sat on the edge of the thin bed and turned his phone over and over in his hand. He could end it tomorrow. One phone call. His father would have Madhu marched out of that building by security before the man finished his breakfast. But that was the easy thing, and the easy thing would solve one room and leave the house rotten. Madhu was one man. The system that let Madhu happen, the buried complaints, the key in the wrong hand, the 11 people too frightened to use their own names, that was the real disease. If he revealed himself now, he would cut off one weed and never find the root. He had to wait. He had to let the 90 days run, gather everything, document it so completely that when the truth came, it would not just remove one Madhu, but make it impossible for the next Madhu to ever do the same thing. He understood all of that with the cold, clear part of his mind. The problem was the other part. The part that had watched a daisy wait for an old woman's answer. The part that already could not stand the idea of that man sitting in his office with the key to her stolen voice in his drawer. Smiling, Ike opened the notebook. Under the day's date, he wrote one line that was not for the report at all. She reported him and they buried it. Fix this, not as the chairman's son, as a person who knows. The second week, Ike made a decision that he wrote into his report in plain words, because he wanted it on record and he wanted his own conscience clear. He wrote, I am removing myself from any assessment of the records unit where Adeas Nwankwo works to avoid bias. My feelings about her conduct cannot be allowed to influence my report on this branch. He underlined it. He did not fully admit to himself yet why he needed that sentence to exist. But a careful man builds the wall before he knows which flood is coming. Because the truth, the one he was only beginning to feel, was this. Ike Nwosu had spent his whole adult life being looked at in a particular way. Women smiled at him differently once they knew the name Adigwe. Men's handshakes changed. He had grown so used to it that he had stopped believing anybody could see him at all. Only the size of his father's company standing behind him, like a shadow he could never step out of. Adeze did not know any of that. To her, he was a struggling trainee in a soft collared shirt who did not know where the shipment forms were. And she was kind to him anyway. Kind for no reason. Kind with nothing to gain. For the first time in years, somebody was being good to the man. And not to the money. And he had not known how starved he was for that, until it was placed, unasked, in front of him, who would have been horrified to learn how much she had given him with one cup of shared lunch and one patient explanation of a filing system. They began to talk. small things. At first, only at the photocopier, or in the queue for the one working microwave, or on the stairs when the lift was broken, which was often. She told him she was the firstborn of 5, that her father had died when she was 19, and she had more or less raised her younger ones, that she took this job because it was steady, and steady was the only luxury she had ever wanted. He told her a version of himself, a true version, just with the most important fact removed. He told her he had lost his footing for a while, that he was trying to rebuild, that he was managing. All of it was true. He had lost his footing, in a way. He was rebuilding something. He was managing on 47,300 naira and learning every day how thin that line was. "You don't talk like a small boy," she told him once, studying his face on the stairwell. "You talk like somebody who has seen things. I can't place you." "Maybe I have just been quiet a long time," he said. "Quiet ones are the dangerous ones," she said, and she smiled and went back up the stairs, and did not know how close to the bone she had cut. Madhu noticed, of course. Men like Madhu have radar for exactly 2 things. People above them they must flatter, and people below them they can crush. And he had decided weeks ago that the trainee was a thing to be crushed. And now he saw the one woman he had never forgiven for saying no to him being warm to that thing, and something old and ugly woke up in him. The slap that started this story did not come out of nowhere. It came at the end of a week that Madhu spent slowly turning the heat up. On Monday, he made Ike refile an entire cabinet that was already filed correctly, then accused him of disorganizing it, then made him do it again. On Tuesday, he sent him out in the rain to buy his lunch, and then said the rice was cold and made him go back. On Wednesday, in front of the whole floor, he held up a report. Ike had typed perfectly and said, "Did your village school not teach you to spell? Or did they teach you nothing because they already knew you would only ever be carrying my files?" Gozi laughed. A few others laughed because not laughing was its own kind of danger. And Ike took it. All of it. He took it the way a man takes a storm he knows will end, his face a closed door, because he had a notebook and a plan and a deeper game. He told himself the patience was strategy. It was strategy. But somewhere in that week, it also stopped being only strategy and started being something harder. Because every insult Madhu threw at the trainee was an insult he had thrown 100 times at people who could not document it, could not wait it out, could not call their father. Cleaners, drivers, real trainees with sick mothers. Ike was sitting inside their lives now, and the rage he kept off his face was no longer just for himself. Thursday afternoon, the water. Madhu came back from a long lunch in a bad mood, and a man like that, in a bad mood, goes looking. He found Ike at the corner desk, working. He picked up a half-full bottle of water from a nearby table. "This your corner is dirty," he announced. "Look at this floor." The floor was clean. Mama Grace had mopped it 90 minutes before. Madhu unscrewed the cap, walked over, and tipped the bottle out across the floor, slowly, watching Ike's face the whole time. The water spread between the desks and pooled around the legs of the corner desk. "Now it is dirty," Madhu said. "Clean it, on your knees. Like the cleaner you will end up as when this company finally throws you out." That was the moment from the beginning of our story. The trainee on one knee with a rag. Ngozi's phone held sideways, the whole floor watching. And Madhu standing over a kneeling man, saying the thing about being born to it, about his hands being good for nothing else. Ike wiped the floor, slow and steady. His face gave nothing. Inside, the cold part of his mind was saying, "Almost there. 3 more weeks, document it, let it run." And the other part of his mind, the part that had heard Mama Grace in the kitchen, the part that had watched Adeyeze wait for an old woman's good morning, the other part was a wall holding back a sea. He finished. He stood up. He folded the wet rag with a calm that, looking back, several people would describe as the strangest thing they ever saw. because it was the calm of a man who had been something. "Are you satisfied, sir?" he asked. Quiet, even. And maybe it was the word satisfied, or maybe it was the steadiness in it that refused to break, but something in Ike's quiet enraged Madhu more than shouting ever could have. Because a man who pours water on the floor to make you small needs you to look small, and Ike, kneeling, had never once looked small. "You are mocking me," Madhu said. His voice dropped. "You think you are clever. A common trainee eating from my hand, and you want to mock me in my own office." He stepped close. "Apologize now. On your knees again. Say sorry, sir, I am nothing." "I cleaned the floor, sir," Ike said. "I will not say I am nothing, because I am not." The office had gone completely silent. The photocopier hummed. Somewhere a phone rang and nobody picked it. And Madhu, who had spent 9 years never once being told no by anyone smaller than him, drew back his hand and slapped Ike Nwosu's across the face. It was the slap from the beginning, the one that froze 30 people at the same breath, the one that made the woman by the printer drop her files, except it was not the woman by the printer who moved first. It was Adai's. Her chair scraped back so hard it nearly fell. She was across that floor before the sound of the slap had finished bouncing off the glass, and she put herself between Madhu and Ike, her back to Ike, facing the senior officer with her chin up and her whole body shaking with a fury she did not bother to hide. "Have you finished?" she said. "Have you completely finished? You poured water on a clean floor to make a grown man kneel, and now you are slapping him because he would not call himself nothing? Is this what 9 years in this company made you, Adez?" Madhu's voice was a warning. "Sit down. This does not concern you. Go back to your records before you say something you cannot take back." "It concerns me," she said, "because I am standing in it. You will not touch him again." "Or what?" Madhu said softly, and now there was something worse than anger in his face. There was memory. "Or you will report me? Like last time?" He let the words land. "How did last time go for you, eh? You wrote your nice complaint. You put it in your nice box. And nothing happened. Nothing will happen this time either. You are a clerk. He is a trainee. And I am the one who decides who eats in this office. So sit down, my dear, before you lose the only thing you have." It was the cruelest thing he could have said, because it was true, or it had always been true, until this exact moment. And everyone in that office knew it was true. And the silence afterward was the silence of people watching a woman be reminded of her own smallness. Adeza did not sit down. She was frightened. You could see it in the way her hands had closed into fists at her sides, in the breath she had to take before she could speak. She had a sick mother and 4 siblings, and a salary that disappeared by the 20th of every month. And the man in front of her could end all of it with one signature, and he had done it before in his own way. And she knew exactly what she stood to lose. She did not sit down. "Then I lose it standing up," she said. "But you will not slap him in front of me and have me sit quiet like it is normal. It is not normal. It was never normal. You just made everybody so afraid that they forgot." And behind her, Ike Nwosu, the chairman's son, stood with a red mark blooming on his cheek and his whole chest aching. Not from the slap. The slap was nothing, but from the sight of a woman with everything to lose, putting her body between him and a powerful man. For a trainee she believed could give her nothing in return. Right then, he nearly did it. He nearly said the words that would have ended everything. 3 weeks early, plan be damned. The words were in his mouth. But Madhu, seeing that the whole floor was watching, seeing that something had shifted, that the fear in the room had a crack in it now, made the calculation that bullies make. He smiled a thin smile, picked up his jacket and said, "Both of you. I will deal with you both. Enjoy your last weeks here," and he walked out. Because a man like that always needs to leave on what he tells himself is his own terms. The office let out its breath. People found things to look at. Ngozi quietly deleted the video off her phone. Adaze turned around. Up close, she saw the mark on his face, and something in her broke open. "Are you all right? Let me see." She reached up, almost touched the red place, pulled her hand back. "That man! That wicked man! Come and sit! Don't mind him. Are you okay?" "I'm fine," Ike said, and then, very quietly, in a voice that came from somewhere he had not planned, "You should not have done that." "Done what?" "Put yourself in front of that. For me. You have your mother, your brothers and sisters. You could have lost everything just now." For a trainee, Adaze looked at him as though he had said something genuinely stupid. "And if I had sat down," she said, "what would I have kept?" "A job, yes. And what else?" "I would have kept the thing inside me that lets a man do that to another person while I look at my desk. I would rather lose the job than keep that thing." She shook her head. "You don't understand. The day I let fear decide what is right, I have already lost the most important thing I own. Money I can chase again. That, no." There are sentences a person hears that rearrange the furniture inside them. Ike Nwosu had grown up surrounded by people who calculated everything, who measured every kindness against what it would return, who had taught him without meaning to that the world ran on advantage. And here was a clerk on 40-something thousand naira a month, telling him she would rather be poor and whole than safe and hollow, and meaning every word, and having just proved it with her own body. "Come to my place after work," she said, gathering herself businesslike again, because she could see he was rattled and she did not want to embarrass him by watching too closely. "I will give you ice for that face, and we will talk about what you do now, because that man is not finished, and you need to be ready." That evening, in Adaze's tiny flat, which she shared with 2 of her younger siblings, in a corner of the sitting room, where she had set 2 stools, because there was nowhere else, she pressed a cloth of ice against Ike's cheek and told him the thing that became the heart of the whole story. "Let me tell you what I learned," she said, "the hard way. After he troubled me and I reported it and nothing happened." She sat back on her stool. "I learned that silence is the food these people eat. Madhu is not strong. He has never been strong. He is just standing in a room full of people who have all agreed to be quiet, and the quiet is what holds him up. Every person who looks at their desk while he shouts, every person who laughs because it is safer to laugh, every single one of them is a brick in the wall he stands on. The day enough of them stop being bricks, he falls. He is nothing without our silence." Ike listened. He had auditors and lawyers and consultants whose whole job was to understand systems, and not one of them had ever explained a corrupt office to him as clearly as this woman did on a stool with a melting cloth of ice. "And the other thing I learned," she went on, "is that fighting them with feelings alone is how you lose. I cried in his office, I shouted, I was right, and none of that mattered, because I had nothing written down. No date, no time, no witness who would speak. Just my word against his, and in that office my word weighed nothing. If I could go back, I would not have shouted first. I would have written everything. Every time, every date, the exact hour, who saw it. Because these men can argue with your tears forever. They cannot argue with a record." Ike sat very still, the ice cold against his cheek, and he thought of the small notebook in his back pocket. The one with the dates, the times. 10:41, 9:15, 8:50. Driver Sunday, 9:40 p.m., washing the car. Mama Grace, useless old woman, in front of clients. 2 trainees, 10 p.m., sick mother. He had been building exactly the thing she was describing. And he had a missing piece, the biggest one, that he had not known he had until Mama Grace told him in the kitchen. "Adaze," he said slowly. "Your complaint, the one that disappeared. Do you remember when you wrote it? The date?" She frowned. "Why? Just do you remember?" "Of course I remember." It was the 14th of March. I will never forget that date as long as I live. She studied him, that searching look again. Ike, why are you asking me about a dead complaint? He could not tell her. Not yet. Not without telling her all of it, and he was not ready, and she was not ready, and the timing had to be right, or the whole thing would blow up in a way that helped nobody. So he did the only thing he could. Because I do not think it is dead, he said. I think these things have a way of coming back, and I think you should not give up on it. She looked at him for a long moment, this strange, quiet trainee who asked questions like a man who knew something. And she decided, the way she had decided to stand up in the office, to trust her gut. All right, she said. I won't give up on it. That night, Ike walked the long way back to Ugwoba, through streets where generators coughed and roadside lamps lit small worlds of fried plantain and conversation, and he made his decision. The plan would still run. He would still document the system, not just the man. But Adeyeze's complaint, the 14th of March, the one Madhu had emptied out of the box and made disappear. That was the thread that connected the small, ugly office to the great rot his father had sent him to find. He was going to pull that thread until the whole thing unraveled. And he was going to do it with records, not tears. Because the woman with the melting ice had been right about that too. He called his father from the dark street. Father, it is worse than the letters said. And it is also more solvable than you think, because I have found the keystone. He told him about the complaint box. The key in Madhu's drawer. The 14th of March. Send the audit team. Not next month. The end of my 90 days. But before they come, I want to pull the original complaints back. They did not destroy them. Men like Madhu never destroy, they hoard, because they think the paper is power in their hand. I would bet my name they are in his drawer or his house. I want them found. Officially. By people he cannot stop. There was a silence on his father's end, and then a sound Ikenna had not heard from the old man in a long time. A low, satisfied breath. You went to find a sickness, Chief Adigwe said, and you came back with the cure. Pull the thread, my son. I will send the team on the last day. And Ikenna. A pause. This girl. A daze. You speak her name differently from the others. She does not know who I am, father. I heard that part. That is not what I asked. Ikenna stood in the dark street and did not answer, and his father, being his father, did not need him to. The last week of the 90 days arrived. Madhu, true to his word, had spent it making both their lives a misery, piling impossible work, manufacturing reasons, circling. He had decided to end both of them and was only choosing the most humiliating way. He did not know he was a man standing on a trapdoor, sharpening a knife. It came to a head on a Friday morning. Ike was on his break. Finally, the first he had taken all week, standing with Adeze near the glass doors of the lobby, the two of them talking low, when Madhu spotted them and crossed the floor with the particular speed of a man who has been waiting all morning for a reason. Nwosu, he said. The onboarding files in the store. Go and bring them now. I am on my break, sir, Ike said. I will bring them in 15 minutes. It was such a small thing. It was the smallest possible thing. And that was exactly why it broke Madhu, because the smallness of it meant the trainee was no longer afraid. And a bully cannot survive being unafraid. Who? Madhu said very quietly. Do you think you are? And he reached out and grabbed the front of Ike's shirt, twisting the cheap cloth in his fist, pulling him close. Around them, the lobby went still. Workers stopped. A couple of clients near the reception desk turned to stare. You miserable little nothing, Madhu breathed into his face. You came here in rags. I gave you a chance, and you have done nothing but disrespect me. On your break. On your break. You don't have a break. You don't have anything. Everything you have, I gave you, and I can take it back this second. Let go of my shirt, sir, Ike said. Still calm. Still even. It was, somehow, the calmest he had been all week. Stop it! Adeze had stepped forward, pushing at Madu's arm. Leave him! Have you gone mad? In the lobby, in front of clients. You are mad. Leave him now! Madu shoved her back with his free hand, hard enough that she stumbled into the edge of the reception desk. And that, the sight of him putting his hands on her too, was the thing that finally moved past the wall in Ike's chest, and his own hand came up to grip Madu's wrist with a strength that did not belong to a starving trainee. And for 1 second, something true flashed in Ike's eyes, something that made Madu, deep in his animal brain, suddenly uncertain. And in that exact second, the glass doors of the lobby slid open, and the whole world changed. 2 cars had pulled into the forecourt outside. Not the kind of cars that came to that branch. Long, black, polished. The kind of car that makes a security guard stand up straight without being told. Men in dark suits stepped out of the first one and held the doors. And from the second car, unhurried, in a plain grey Agbada that somehow looked more expensive than anything anyone in that lobby had ever owned, stepped an old man. A few of the senior staff who had been to head office recognized him instantly, and the color ran out of their faces. "It is the chairman," someone whispered. The whisper moved across the lobby like a cold wind. "It is Chief Adigwe." Chief Obiora Adigwe walked into his own branch, the way a man walks into a room he owns, which is to say without hurrying for anyone, and his eyes, sharp as they had been at the dining table in Owerri, took in the whole scene at once. The clients pressed against the wall, the frozen workers, the young trainee with a torn shirt collar, and the senior officer with his fist still twisted in that collar, who had not yet turned around, who did not yet know. The chairman's gaze moved to the trainee, and it softened, just slightly, in a way that several people would later swear they saw and could not explain. "Ikena," Chief Adigwe said. His voice was not loud. It did not need to be. It crossed that silent lobby and landed in the very center of it. "My son, what is going on here?" The word son went off in that room like a glass dropped on marble. Madu's fist was still in the shirt. He felt, before he understood, the floor tilt under him. Slowly, slowly, the way a man turns toward a sound he is praying, he misheard, he turned his head. The chairman was looking directly at the trainee, at Ike Nwosu, at the man Madu had sent for water, sent for files, sent for lunch in the rain. The man Madu had told to spell his name like a village boy. The man Madu had poured water on the floor for and made kneel and slapped across the face and called nothing. "My son." "You," Madu said. His voice had gone strange. His fist had loosened on the shirt without his telling it to. "You are. You." Ike Nwosu, who was Ikena Adigwe, gently took Madu's slack hand off his collar, the way you remove the hand of a sleeping child, and stepped back and straightened the torn shirt with a dignity that the cheap cloth had never deserved. "Ikena Adigwe," he said quietly. "Operations trainee. Employee number 30419. A pause. 9 days I have worked under you, sir, on your floor. Plus 81 before that, watching." The lobby did not breathe, and no one in it was as still as Adeyeze Nwankwo, who stood frozen by the reception desk, one hand still pressed to her side where she had stumbled against it, staring at the man she had pressed ice to the night before. The man whose torn collar she had wanted to mend, the struggling trainee she had thrown her own livelihood in front of, twice, and who was, it turned out, the son of the man who owned the building, the company, the very floor under all their feet. Chief Adigwe came further into the lobby. His sharp old eyes settled on Madu, and they were not soft now at all. "Ipini Madu," he said. "Senior officer, 9 years. He let the years hang. For 4 months, letters have been reaching me at head office. Letters from people in this branch who were too frightened to use their own names. Drivers, cleaners, trainees. People who told me they were not asking for money. They were only asking to be treated like human beings." His voice did not rise. and that was somehow more terrible than if it had. Do you know how those letters reached me, Madhu? By hand. Sneaked out. Because the complaint box I personally ordered to be installed on every floor of every branch, the box that was supposed to bring their words straight to me, was being emptied by the very man their words were about. You had the key. You have always had the key. Sir, Madhu said. His legs were not holding him properly anymore. Sir, there is a misunderstanding. These people, they exaggerate. I run a tight floor, that is all. A tight floor, sir. I never. You poured water on a clean floor this very week, said a clear voice, and made him kneel to wipe it. And then you slapped him. I was there. The whole floor was there. It was a daze. Her voice was shaking, but it carried. She had found, somewhere under the shock, the same thing that had made her stand up before. Madhu rounded on her, the old reflex. You stay out of our euros. And Chief Adigwe said one word, enough. And Madhu stopped as though a hand had closed on his throat. The audit team had come in behind the chairman, 4 of them, calm and grey and carrying cases. One of them stepped forward. Mr. Madhu, she said, we have a court-backed authorization to search this branch, your office, and your desk, and to seize all documents relating to staff complaints. We will start with the locked lower drawer of your desk. You can hand over the key, or we can open it without you. The first option is better for you. The whole room watched Ifinyi Madhu, understand that there was no floor left under him. For a moment he looked as though he would run. Then his shoulders came down, and he reached into his pocket with a hand that had gone old and slow, and he held out a small key. They opened the drawer, and it was all there, exactly as Ikenna had bet his name it would be. Because men like Madhu never destroy, they hoard. A thick folder of complaint forms, dozens of them going back over a year, every one of them pulled from the box that was supposed to bring them to Owerri. The trainees with the sick mothers, Driver Sunday, Mama Grace. Voices that had thought they were screaming into nothing, and had been because one man had been standing at the mouth of the well, catching every cry and folding it into a drawer, and near the top, on its own, in handwriting, Adeyeze recognized before the auditor even read the date aloud, was a single form. 14th of March. Adeyeze made a small sound. Her hand went to her mouth. There it was, her voice. The one she had been told was dead, was lost, was nothing. It had not been dead. It had been in a drawer the whole time, 8 steps from her desk, while the man who took it sat there every day and watched her, believed she had screamed for nothing. This one, the auditor said, lifting the March form gently, is exactly why we are here. She looked at Adeyeze. You wrote this? Adeyeze could not speak. She nodded. It is not lost, the auditor said. It was never lost. It is now in the official record, where it always should have been. And it will be acted on. What happened to Ifinyi Madhu happened the way real things happen. Not in a flash of lightning, but in the slow, grinding, satisfying turn of a system, finally working. He was suspended on the spot, walked out of the building, by the security men he had spent 9 years feeling superior to. The seized folder became the center of a formal investigation. Because the complaints included his physical assault on Ike in front of 30 witnesses, and his shoving of Adeyeze, and an old, recovered complaint of him putting his hands on her, the company's lawyers did not merely fire him. They referred the assault matters to the authorities, and they made sure, this time, that every date and every witness was on record, so that nothing could disappear into any drawer ever again. Ngozi, who had filmed a kneeling man for sport and laughed loudest, was not walked out, but she sat through a disciplinary hearing with her eyes on her hands, and the laughter was finished in her for a long time. And Mama Grace, the cleaner he had called a useless old woman in front of clients, stood quietly in the corner of the lobby and watched the security men take Madhu out through the glass doors, and she did not gloat. She just pressed her lips together and nodded. Once, slowly, the nod of a person who has waited a long time to see a thing set right and has half stopped believing she ever would. You would think that would be the happy ending. The bad man punished, the buried voices raised, the kind ones rewarded. And it was, all of that was true. But there was one person in that lobby for whom the reveal was not a victory at all. Adeyeze Nwankwo stood in the middle of it, in the noise and the movement, and the relief breaking over the office like water, and she was not relieved. She felt as though the floor had been taken out from under her, along with Madu's, because she was doing the arithmetic, and the arithmetic hurt. The night she had pressed ice to his cheek, he had known. The day she had thrown her job in front of a powerful man's fist to protect him, twice he had known. Every conversation on the stairwell, every shared lunch, every honest, unguarded thing she had told this struggling trainee about her dead father, and her 4 siblings and the salary that ran out by the 20th, all of it, she had given to a man who was watching her from behind a name she did not know he had, like a man behind a one-way mirror. She had been so careful. She had judged no one for being poor. She had been good to him precisely because he had nothing, and he had everything. When the worst of the commotion had passed, when the auditors had moved their search up to Madu's office, and the clients had been quietly seen out, and the floor had begun the strange business of going back to normal, Ikenna found her by the reception desk, where she had not moved. "A daze," he said. She looked at him. Her eyes were dry, which was somehow worse than tears. "All this time," she said. Her voice was very quiet. "When I gave you the file because you couldn't find it. When I told you not to mind them. When I stood in front of that man and felt my own knees shaking, twice, because I thought you had no one in the world to stand for you." She drew a breath. "You had all of this. You had your father. You had the whole company. You were never the man I thought I was protecting. You let me believe a story. You let me give my real self to a costume. Daisy, I was going to tell Yo. When?" she said, and now there was an edge. "After how many more times I made a fool of myself for you. You asked me about my complaint, the 14th of March. You looked me in the eye and asked me the date and let me think it was a kind man's encouragement, and all the time you were holding a thread you knew led straight into that drawer. You knew. You knew the whole time, and you let me keep being the small one in the story who doesn't know what is really going on. He had no defense because she was right. And the worst part of being a careful man is knowing exactly when carefulness has become a kind of lie. You are right," he said. "All of it. I told myself I was protecting the plan. Protecting the other people whose letters brought me here. And that part was real. But it is also true that I let you keep believing something false, long after I knew it was hurting you. I took away your right to choose what you were walking into. That was not mine to take." He paused. "I am sorry. Not the kind of sorry that is asking for something. The kind that is just true." Adaze looked at him for a long moment. "I need to not see your face for a while," she said. "Can you give me that?" "Yes," he said. "Anything you want." She turned and walked back to her desk. And she sat down, and she did not cry there either. Because she had learned a long time ago how to hold things until she got home. And Ikenna, Adigwe, watched her go and understood that he had found the rot in his father's company, and pulled it out by the root, and in the same motion had broken the one clean thing he had found in the whole building. The fixing of the Enugu branch did not wait for anyone's broken heart to mend. Within 2 weeks, on Chief Adigwe's direct order, the complaint system was rebuilt from the ground up. The boxes were gone. In their place was a confidential line that went to an independent office in Owerri, an office that answered to no branch manager and could not be emptied by any local hand. Every recovered complaint from Madu's drawer was investigated, properly, one by one. Driver Sunday got the back pay for every night he had washed a car that was not company business. The trainees with the sick mother got a written apology and, more than that, a guarantee in writing that overtime would be paid and that no one could keep them past hours for work that could wait. This was the part that Ikenna cared about most, in the end, and it was the part nobody filmed. It is satisfying to watch one wicked man walked out of a building. It is rarer, and it matters more, to watch the door he came through get bricked up so the next one cannot use it. A bad man removed is a relief. A system fixed so that the next bad man has no room to grow, that is justice. The first feels good for a day. The second protects people who will never even know their protection has a name. And Adeze, in all of this, was not forgotten, but she was also not bought. Chief Adigwe, who had heard the whole story from his son and had drawn his own conclusions, did a careful thing. He had Adeze transferred to head office in Owerri, not as a favor to his son, but because the woman who had explained the entire mechanism of office cruelty on a stool with melting ice, the woman who had thrown her livelihood in front of power twice without flinching, was exactly the kind of person you put in charge of building a new complaints system. He gave her a real role, with real authority, in the very office that now received the confidential reports. He gave her, in other words, the power to make sure that no other woman's voice would ever again sit dead in a drawer 8 steps from her desk, while the man who took it watched her grieve it. He did not tell her his son had anything to do with the transfer, because his son had asked him not to, and for once Ikenna had asked for something not to happen rather than to happen. It took Adeze 3 weeks to be ready to look at Ikenna's face. In those 3 weeks, she did a thing that he did not do for her and could not have done for her, she thought. She went back over every conversation, slowly the way she had taught him to go back over events, with the feelings set aside and only the facts laid out, and here is what she found when she was honest. The kindness had not been fake. She kept testing it for fakeness, and it kept passing. He had never once in all those weeks tried to impress her. A man pretending to be poor to win a woman would have hinted at his real wealth, dropped clues, set up a reveal that made him the hero. He had done the exact opposite. He had hidden it, even when hiding it cost him, even when it would have been easy and flattering to let it slip. He had listened to her talk about being broke, without ever once making her feel he was slumming it. And when she had thrown herself in front of Madhu, he had not enjoyed the rescue fantasy of it. He had been distressed. He had told her she should not have done it. He had been more worried about her job than about his own dignity. That was not the behavior of a man playing a game with her. That was the behavior of a man who had genuinely forgotten, for a while, that he was anybody at all, and had been quietly grateful to a woman for letting him. The lie was real and it had hurt, and she did not have to pretend it away. But the man underneath the lie was also real, and she had not been wrong about him. Both things were true. She had spent years sorting people into kind and unkind, and here was a person who had done an unkind thing for an understandable reason and was honest about it being unkind. And that, she realized, was not the same as a cruel man. The world was bigger and stranger than her 2 boxes. On a Thursday, in the head office in Owerri, a message came to her new desk. "Please come to the chairman's office." She took a breath and she went. When she opened the door, Ikenna was there, sitting, waiting. He stood up when she came in. For a moment, neither of them said anything, and the silence carried all 3 weeks of it. Chief Adigwe rose from behind his desk. "I will leave you two to talk," he said, and the old man walked out, and there was the smallest, driest hint of a smile on his face as he passed his son, because fathers are like that. Ikenna did not rush at her with apologies. He had learned, finally, that words were not the currency she trusted. So he did the thing she had taught him on the stool with the ice. He put a record in front of her. It was a single page from his report, the one he had written in the second week. He slid it across the desk to her, and she read it. I am removing myself from any assessment of the records unit, where Adezen Wankwo works, to avoid bias. My feelings about her conduct cannot be allowed to influence my report on this branch. The date at the top was 3 weeks before the reveal. 3 weeks before he had any reason to perform anything for her, because she had not even known he was anyone, because there was no audience, no game, no advantage. It was a private wall a private man had built around a feeling he had not yet admitted to himself. I wrote that, he said quietly, long before that lobby, when no one was watching, when it could win me nothing. I am not showing it to you to be forgiven. I am showing it to you because you taught me that feelings can be argued with forever, but a record cannot. So here is my record. Whatever else was a lie, this was true before I knew it was true. Ades read it again. Then she set it down on the desk, very carefully, the way you set down something that turns out to matter. You still should have told me, she said. I know. You took away my choice. I will always know that you did that. I know that too, and I will spend a long time being careful never to do anything like it again. She was quiet for a while. Then, she said the thing she had worked out alone over 3 weeks. Said it plainly, because plain was how she did everything. I was angry, she said. I am still a little angry. But I sat with it, and I could not make the kindness into a lie, no matter how I tried. You never once tried to impress me. A man playing a game would have. You hid the thing that would have made me admire you, even when hiding it hurt you. That is the opposite of a trick. She met his eyes. I think you forgot who you were for a while. And I think you needed to. And I think the man you were, when you forgot, is the man I was being kind to. So, I forgive you. Something went out of Ikenna's shoulders that he had been carrying for 3 weeks without knowing. But, she said, and lifted one finger, the records officer in her, never far away. I am putting it on the record. Do not ever build me a costume again. Do not ever decide for me what I am allowed to know. If you cannot tell me a thing yet, you say, I cannot tell you this yet, and you let me choose whether to wait. You do not let me walk around inside a lie, because you have decided it is for my own good. Are we understanding each other? She had used his old supervisor's words on purpose, and the corner of her mouth moved. Ikenna actually laughed, the first real laugh in 3 weeks. Yes, sir, he said. They did not rush after that. He courted her the slow way, the only way she would have accepted, in a city where she now had her own work that mattered, and her own standing that had nothing to do with him. She built the new complaints office into something feared by exactly the right people, and trusted by exactly the right ones. Reports that would once have died in a drawer now reached a woman who had felt, in her own body, what it cost to be ignored, and who therefore could not be bribed or bored into ignoring anyone. People at the bottom of the company learned her name the way you learn the name of a door that actually opens. Months passed. Her younger ones finished school terms. Her mother got better care than the salary that ran out by the 20th had ever allowed, though Adieze had insisted fiercely on paying her own way as far as her own way would stretch, and Ikenna had learned not to fight her on it, because her pride was not foolishness. It was the same spine that had stood up in the lobby. And then, one evening, in a quiet restaurant where the only other sound was a slow song and the clink of glasses, Ikenna Adigwe stood up from the table and went down on one knee. It was not lost on either of them, the shape of it. The last time the whole world saw this man on one knee, he had been wiping a floor in a torn shirt, being told that kneeling was all his hands were good for. Now he knelt of his own choosing, in front of a woman who had once put her whole life between him and harm when she thought he was nothing. "The first thing you ever did for me," he said, "was wait for the cleaner to finish answering you." Everyone else walked past her like she was furniture. You stopped, and you waited, and you actually listened. I think I started loving you that morning, and it took me weeks to know it. He opened a small box. You were good to me when you thought I had nothing. You stood in front of a powerful man's fist for a trainee who could give you nothing back. You taught me on a stool with a cloth of melting ice. More about justice than every lawyer my father has ever paid. And when you found out I had lied to you, you did not run, and you did not pretend it away. You sat with it, and you sorted the true from the false with your own hands. And you chose me on purpose, with your eyes open, which is the only way I ever wanted to be chosen by anybody. His voice was not quite steady. I spent my whole life being seen as a name and a company. You are the only person who saw the man before she ever saw the name. Marry me. Let me spend the rest of it being known by you. Adeze Nwankwo, who had taught herself a long time ago to hold things until she got home, did not hold this one. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you." He slid the ring onto her finger and stood, and pulled her into him, and the few people in the restaurant smiled and clapped, not knowing the half of it, not knowing about the water poured on the clean floor, or the complaint that came back from the dead or the page. In a report that proved a feeling had been true before anyone was watching. 3 months later, they married in a hall in Owerri full of family and friends, and a surprising number of people from the very bottom of Adigwe Holdings, because Adeze had insisted that Driver Sunday be there, and Mama Grace, who cried more than anyone and kept saying she had always known that boy was good. Chief Adigwe watched his son and his new daughter dance, and the old man, who had sent a boy to find a sickness, found that what the boy had brought home in the end was not just a cleaned-out branch, but a person, a whole, fierce, honest person, who would keep the company human long after the old man himself was gone. He had been looking for someone to fix his company. He had found someone to be its conscience. A quick word before you go. The cruelty Adeze and the others faced in that office, the buried complaints, the man who used a job as a weapon, the way fear can make a whole room go quiet while one person is humiliated. These are not only things that happen in stories. They happen in real workplaces, to real people, more often than most of us would like to believe. And the rules that are supposed to protect workers, the channels that are supposed to carry their voices, differ a great deal depending on where you live and work. If you or someone you care about is facing harassment, abuse, or exploitation on the job, please do not look for your answer in a comment section under a video. Speak to someone who can actually act. In the United States, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, the EEOC, exists for exactly this, and a local legal aid clinic can help you understand your rights wherever you are. I am not a lawyer, and nothing in this story is advice. I am only someone who wanted to tell a story about human dignity, and to say one thing plainly, the way Adeze would. Your worth was never in your salary, your uniform, or what anybody decided you were born to be. Real class is character, and no one, no matter how big his office, has the right to make you kneel.